Well, nobody wants to make mistakes. I would rather do it right than do it wrong, and so would you. The truth is, we make mistakes all the time. We continue to make mistakes through our entire business career. So if we don't learn how to solve that issue, and we don't learn how to learn from mistakes and make mistake learning opportunities and ask the people who made mistakes, what did you learn? We're never going to have a great company because everyone's going to be hiding their mistakes.
Josh Patrick, welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Amazing, right?
So Josh, this is number 2. Your reputation endured the last time being on my podcast. And so here we are doing it again.
Yeah, well, I guess your audience is a glutton for punishment. What can I say?
I have to say, you're the only guest that actually put on his website a declaration that he's a curmudgeon.
Yes.
Where does that come from, where someone goes, you know what, I'm just going to put that on my website?
Because I am a curmudgeon. Curmudgeons aren't always mean. They're just sort of crusty and say things that other people think but won't say.
Mm-hmm.
So, being a curmudgeon is not a bad thing. In fact, when I coach people to do customer advisory groups, I say you have to have a curmudgeon in your group. And the reason is nobody's going to tell you the truth until somebody speaks up and said there's a problem. And if you don't have a curmudgeon, everyone's going to play nice and you never really get any great information.
Yeah. So Josh, your company is sustainablebusiness.co, and we're wrapping this curmudgeon into this. Okay. So sustainablebusiness.co, you come in and you help folks build a business that's sustainable. And sometimes we got to talk about some of the hard things.
We often have to talk about some of the hard things. I mean, there's 2 general groups of people to hire consultants. The group is the one group which I really like working with, which is people who actually want to grow their business and make change and make it work. And then there's the other group that wants to have their ego stroked, and they hire consultants to do that. I've had both types of customers over the years, and the customer that wants their ego stroked, I'm not your choice. If you want to have a great business that's personally and economically sustainable, I'm your guy.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. You start a business, you get going, you're own all the mistakes, you own all the good things. You get to a point, and one day you start to maybe ask yourself, I think I need a little outside help. That's a hard road to cross right there, when you have to admit that you don't know everything.
It is and it isn't. I mean, the truth is, if you look at world-class performers, whether they're actors or dancers or musicians or athletes, they all have coaches. Sometimes they're called teachers, but at the end of the day, they're all coaches. My job is not to tell somebody who already has a successful business that they have to change everything. They already know everything basically have to do. It's really going around the corners and getting a 2% improvement here, a 2% improvement there. And when you start adding all those 2% improvements up, so pretty soon they're 10, 20, 30%. And that's a big deal. I learned a long time ago, I can't come in and have you make a major change in what you're doing because you're just not going to do it. And the truth is, everybody needs to have some good advice along the way, and none of us make it to where we want to be by ourselves. We need help. Sometimes that's internal help, and sometimes that's external help, and most often is both.
Wow. So let's build on your authority a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You have a couple of companies. You actually know what you're talking about. So enlighten us.
The only reason I know what I'm talking about is I've made all the mistakes that I help people not make. Back when I was in my early days, this is going back when I was 24 years old in 1976. That's like, another century ago.
That's
It
when
was
you
another century
really,
ago.
that's when you
And
really
I,
do everything, right?
right. And I was arguably the worst and most obnoxious young business owner who ever existed. And the reason is really simple. The worst thing that ever happened to someone 24 years old happened to me. I was really, really, really successful out of the box. I grew my business from $75,000 to 1.5 million in 6 months. Now, part of that was an acquisition of a bankrupt company, but still, no, I went from having one part-time employee to 25 employees in 6 months. And I thought I was God's gift to private business owners. And the truth was, I wasn't. I was just lucky. And we all have a certain amount of good luck and a certain amount of bad luck in our lives. And those who are of us who make it past that, we take advantage of the good luck and we manage the bad luck. And sometimes managing that bad luck takes a couple of years. For me, it took 4 or 5 years. Because right after that great 6 month start, then I had 3 years of pain. We made the worst acquisition I ever made of all times. I ended up paying 5 times what the business was worth. It took me 7 years to dig out of that hole. I was a till of the hunt as a manager. It was never my fault. It was always someone else's fault. And so I would blame and justify my way through the world. I didn't know what the difference was between a cash flow statement and a profit and loss statement. That almost put me out of business because growing your business that fast costs a lot of money. And we were showing a very nice profit, but we had no cash. And after about 2 years of that, everyone started calling me and saying, if you don't pay me tomorrow, we're going to cut you off. And on top of that, I had a $200,000 embezzlement that happened during that period because I didn't know how to put good cash controls in place. Other than that, I was a perfect manager.
So what happened? What woke you up? What action did you take?
Well, running out of cash was one thing that woke me up. I mean, there's nothing like, um, you know, after that happened, I had this mantra, which I still have, which is happiness is positive cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big wake up call. The other thing was I went to a new age seminar, a program called Money and You, with a guy named Marshall Thurber. And this was in 1983. And part of that seminar, a major part of that seminar was understanding what personal responsibility was versus blaming and justifying. And I realized after that seminar that I was a justifying and blaming person, and we needed to move to personal responsibility. But here I made another huge mistake. We had said, okay, we're going to have some core values in our company. And one of the core values I said was personal responsibility, but I was not exhibiting personal responsibility. So nobody in my company took me seriously. In fact, everybody in my company called me a great big liar, or a great big fat liar, you might say, although I wasn't fat, but I was a great big liar. And instead of saying this is an aspirational value, which I learned from Patrick Lencioni about 10 years ago, I said, this is a core value. Well, you can't say something's a core value when it's not a core value, because nobody will take you seriously and no one believes anything else you say. So had I said it was an aspirational value and I need your help getting there, and I eventually did say that in a roundabout way, nobody takes you seriously. But it took me 6 or 7 years to make that move where everyone actually really started acting personally responsible in our company because they realized if they didn't, they weren't going to be with us very long. So I started not only walking my talk, but also making sure that people did what they wanted to.
So fast forward, and now you have two businesses, Sustainable and
Stage 2 Planning Partners.
okay.
Stage 2 Planning Partners is a wealth management firm where we help people going through financial transitions. My specialty there is business owners who are selling their businesses. And on the sustainable business, my specialty is helping people get to a sale-ready company, which means you have to first become economically and personally sustainable. And then you can start working on the things that will make you attractive to others. Whether you want to transfer your business internally, externally to your kids, or sell it to a third party, you're going to have to do things in your business to make it attractive to others.
So you're launching your second book. Your first book, I have it pulled up right here. Sustainable, a fable about creating a personally and economically sustainable business. It's a parable about the aardvarks.
Yes.
Tell us a little
And
bit.
do you know why they're aardvarks?
Why?
Because aardvarks have their heads stuck in the sand looking for ants all the time. And I don't want aardvarks. I want people taking their head out of the sand. So we have to help the aardvark family do that.
So your first book is like getting your ducks in a row and just running a company successfully, correct?
Yeah, because you're gonna. I mean, if you create an economically and personally sustainable business, your business will be filling what we call the 4 buckets of profit, and you'll be having a good time. You will not get burned out. Too many business owners spend their life doing tactical stuff because they don't feel they know how to delegate. They tried it, it doesn't work. They can't grow the business past 15 or 20 employees. And as a result, they're stuck doing those same old tactical things they never really liked, but they had to do to run the business. And after doing that for 20 or 30 years, you're just sick of it and want to move on. Well, the most important thing you can do in that stage of your business is learn how not to be sick of your business, which is making the move from being a tactical owner to a strategic owner. And we call these the roles that people play within their business. And there's 4 of them.
Excellent. So then your second book, I'm going to hold it up here for those that are watching on YouTube, Sale Ready Company, The Sale Ready Company. It's a beautiful cover. And in this, we catch up with our family after the first book. The owner, he's really kind of contemplating what's going to happen in the next stage. Can he start to exit the business? He's got some folks that are in the story. His wife, she's got some preferences. He's got a jackwagon for a son that's really annoying to everyone. He's got a couple of good employees.
By the way, past annoying. The son is what we call a brilliant jerk. Somebody who is technically really, really good at what they do, and they drive the rest of the people around them absolutely 100% bonkers, to the point that some people are getting ready to quit.
Yeah. And I've made that mistake. I've hired someone that wasn't really aligned with my company, but it was expensive in the way that I had good employees exit. I had setbacks. There was just it was an expensive mistake. And I can start to see a little bit of this danger on the horizon here for your characters in this book.
Yeah, well, the truth is, anybody who's been in business for 10 years or more has hired at least one brilliant jerk in their life, because we get just kind of sucked into the resume and the technical skills, and we forget to look at the values that they bring to the party. And if their value is, I'm a narcissist, they're not going to work very well in my company. There are companies narcissists do really, really well in. Oracle is a good example of that. I mean, the people who come out of our Oracle, in fact, Silicon Valley, that's full of narcissistic behavior. And if that's what your behavior is, go someplace where you're going to be accepted. If it's not, then stay away from there.
Totally. So in this book, I was shocked when I learned a while back at the high percentage of family-owned businesses that are in existence. And the problems that you're discussing in here are probably apply to most private businesses. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. I mean, the truth is, we're talking about getting a business ready for sale, which means getting the owner ready to transition. And there's the economic side of that, which we talk about in the book. And there's the personal side of that, which we talk about in the book. So we've come up with what we call the 2 sides of a business. There's the personal side and there's the economic side. And the personal side is where satisfaction comes in. It's where your ego comes in. It's where your community, basis comes in. And then there's the economic side. Can you afford to live a great life? And eventually, can you afford to leave your business? And do you have the assets to move on? Both of those both are equally important. Both really need to be paid attention to. If you don't pay attention to the personal side, you're going to get burned out. If you don't pay attention to the economic side, there's a good chance you won't make 5 years in your business. So both have to be, and it's not always 50-50. When you start the business off, the personal side is going to be way, way less than the economic side. As you get success and you start going up those ladders of economic viability, the economic viability is going to go down in importance, but the personal side is going to go up in importance. That generally happens when people get close to 50 years old and they've been doing their business for about 20 years. Because the first 20 years, I find most people in business have no idea what they're doing. There's no manual. They're not a franchise. They don't have a system. All those things have to be developed. And because business owners don't like coaches very much, or they don't think they want to get coaches, they feel like they have to do it themselves. And all that means is they get themselves in a whole lot of trouble. And it takes them 20 years to figure it out.
So I'm just wondering, so this event that must happen with the business owner where they finally go, all right, I'm open to a conversation with Josh. Where generally, what's triggered that? What's happened? Help us relate.
Typically, it happens when they're burned out. I used to tell this joke when I was doing talks, I still do talks. And I used to open with this: hey, you're going to walk in my office and I'm going to ask you why you're here. And you're going to say, I want to sell my business. And I'm going to say, when? And you're going to say, yesterday. And when someone says that to me or says something like that to me, I know we're not really going to sell the business. I know what we're going to really do is fix your relationship to the business first, and then we'll see if we want to sell it. And my experience has been over the years is that once we fix your relationship to the business and we get you to be economically and personally sustainable, I'm going to come back to you and say, okay, now we're ready to start looking at the sale ready side. And you're going to look at me like I'm nuts because you're having too much fun and you're making too much money. And you're going to say, why would I ever want to sell this? I don't work very hard and I'm making a ton of money. Now, this has happened to me over and over and over. So I've gotten used to this happening. So I know that I'm really not getting your business ready to be sold. I'm getting your business sale ready with you. And I'm your thinking partner. You're not going to just do what I say. We're going to decide together what we're going to work on and what we're not going to work on, because nobody has a perfect business that's 100% sale ready that wouldn't make it through due diligence without one or two things we're going to have a serious conversation with a buyer about. We don't have to fix it. We have to be able to figure out why it's not a problem.
Never thought about having a dysfunctional relationship with my business.
There are way too many owners that do that. They have dysfunctional relationships with their business, with their employees, with their spouse, with their kids. It all goes, and it also depends on what generation you are. I'm starting to think about my third book, and my third book is going to be the generational issue, which is I don't want to get advice from anybody because I've been hearing from my own man for the last 15 years and I'm sick of it. Or 40 years or 50 years or whatever the time frame is, because people who start businesses have to be pretty tough. Starting a business from scratch is way harder than taking over the business from your parents or as a manager, because you don't have to do the heavy lifting with no revenue, nothing coming in the door, and creating something out of nothing. You just have to take that something and make it better, which is a lot easier than doing that. But the people who created those first generation businesses, they generally are pretty tough, both in their business and at home. And they tell their kids in no uncertain terms what they need to do to fix things, whether it's their personal life or what they're doing in business. And they have a hard time separating their family life from the business life with a child. And I do a lot of coaching with second generations getting ready to take over a business. And I can tell you it's pretty much 100% thing where the kids resent the parents and the parents resent the kids. We need to get that fixed if we're going to do a successful transfer.
That seems pretty ambitious. How do you step in and do the therapy in a family business? I couldn't imagine a process more fraught with landmines than that.
Well, there's a fair amount. I mean, unfortunately, more than once I've had to go to a parent and say, your child is not a good fit in this company. It's best if they do something else.
Mhm.
In fact, I just went through that I'm going through that with a company right now where the two brothers literally don't talk. One of the brothers barely talks to the father, and he's the one who really should take over the business. So what I'm doing with him is what I did in the book is we're sending him off with his own little piece of the business. And if he's good, he'll grow it. And if he's not, it'll fold. And then the father has to figure out what's next.
Wow. So your books are parables or stories. Why did you decide to write books about transitioning your business via parables?
Um, the truth is I did it because it amused me to start off with. That's one truth. The other truth is I find that especially blue collar private business owners, number one, really aren't readers.
Mhm.
And getting them to finish a how-to book is almost impossible. But because it's a parable, which means it's a story, it's easy to get sucked into the story of what's happening with his family. And as people are reading the story, they're going to say, oh, I recognize myself there. Or, boy, am I glad that's not me. Or a little bit of a mix of both. And at certain points in the story, every business owner is going to say, oh, yeah, I know about that. How's this guy going to get out of it? And they'll learn something about the getting out of it that they can apply in their own business. And it's not threatening because we're not talking about their business. We're not telling them their failures. We're just saying, here's this story about this family. What can you learn from it? And people always take something learning away from a story. There are people who hate the business parable genre. I mean, I'm pretty good friends with one of the famous internet people. And I've asked him to write a blurb for my book. And he says, it's a parable. I hate them. I'm not going to do it. That was my first book. My second book, I wrote to him. I said, do you still hate parables? And he said, yep. But on the other hand, there are people who are really successful at writing parables. You look at The Gold by, Gold Rat, or you look at anything Patrick Lencioni has written, or Steve Farber's parables. I mean, these guys have written really good books that are really valuable and have tremendous lessons in there. And it's easier to consume because it's a story.
Totally. I was admiring how you were able, as you're writing that, I could relate with the feelings of the receptionist or the mom. I could kind of imagine you didn't have to write the details of their feelings. You kind of were able to fill in a lot of other details from your brain by understanding, oh, she's going to be real protective of the son.
Yeah, it's one of the good things about writing a book, or one of the things about writing a book, which I learned, and I got lucky the first time around, is having a good content editor is really important.
Mm.
And my editor would keep hammering into me, says, you only can be in the heads of two people, John, the patriarch, and Aaron, the consultant. Everybody else has to reveal everything about themselves in dialogue. So when you do that, you're not confusing the reader.
Yeah.
If I let you get in the head of every single one of our characters, it wouldn't be long before you would try to figure out who's on first.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we're having a great conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, we're talking with Josh Patrick. His new book, The Sale Ready Company, is out. It's what it takes to create a business someone would want to own. Hopefully, that would be you, the business owner. So, Josh, I've got some questions I want to ask you along these lines. These are questions I hear often. And so I'm interested in what your answers are. Are you ready?
Sure.
So you had alluded to you talked to someone that says, I want to sell my company yesterday, but how long does it take to sell a company?
If you're lucky and it's really fast and you've got a business that's actually very, very sellable, it could be as low as little as 6 months or as long as 10 years. I mean, it really depends on where you are on the road. And the other side of the factor is you may not be able to sell your company at all. I mean, about 50% of the companies that go for sale never sell.
Wow.
And those are companies that are saleable. If you go to bizbuy.com or bizsell or bizbuysell.com, only about 5% of the businesses that are listed on that site ever sell.
That's pretty sobering.
Yeah, well, there's the reason you need to know how saleable your business is. And if your business really isn't very saleable, there are other strategies that you can use to get yourself so you can leave your business when you want and the way you want. But it's not going to be through a sale. And in fact, even if it is through a sale, the business sale is not going to get you to financial independence unless you're in the top 1 to 1/10% of all business owners. Let's say I sell my business for $2 million, nice amount of money. Not many businesses will sell for that much. But first of all, I'm going to lose 40% of that to taxes and fees. So now I'm down to $1.2 million. And if I invest that and I talk to a financial planner, they'll say, oh, you can spend about $40,000 to $50,000 a year out of that. If my business is selling for $2 million, that means it's making between $300,000 and $400,000 a year, meaning I'm probably living on about $150,000. So 50,000 is a long way from 150. So if you think you're just going to sell your business and right off into the sunset, you're not.
Ouch. How to sell your company to prospective employees. That's always a consideration.
That's a great, in fact, I would say probably that is the number one transfer method that private business owners actually use. One of my friends, a guy named John Brown, wrote the foreword for the book. He's also the founder of Business Enterprise Institute, and they train advisors how to help people leave their business by doing exit plans. And John tells me that the vast majority of the plans they do are for internal transfers, not third-party sales, not families taking over the business. But they are, in fact, the internal sale to managers is pretty darn similar to the transfer to your children because neither of them have any money.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to figure out how are we going to get this business transferred in a way to these people in a way that they can afford to buy it. And I'm going to get enough where I feel it's worth my time and effort.
Wow. So you mentioned about buying an existing small business. How would you approach that?
Well, you go out and you say, first of all, you want to find out what is it that you like to do. I mean, are you going to buy a franchise and start from scratch? Are you going to buy an existing business that is a franchise and go from there and use their systems? Are you going to buy a business that's in existence right now that has pretty good systems in place and you plan to just go ahead with that? Or you're going to buy a business where you're going to have to fix it and make things, work and have systems and learn how to delegate and get recurring revenue, all the stuff you need to do to make a business work that's not very successful. A business is not very successful, you're going to be able to buy for very little money. A business that's highly successful, well, you're going to figure out if you don't have a few $100,000 sitting around that you can put in, you're probably going to have a challenge finding a business that's buyable because the owner is not likely to want to take 90% of the sale on paper, and a bank is not going to loan you the money. But there are ways of doing that where, say, I can come up with 20% or 25%, maybe I can do a second mortgage on my house. There are people who take money out of the retirement plans, which I don't recommend for a variety of reasons. But if you can come up with that, 20%, in the way you could do it is you could up with 10% down yourself, which the owner gets. The owner does 20% financing, but they subordinate themselves to the bank, which means the bank is in first place. Now you got 70% and you get an SBA loan with a subordination. And now you got your money down so you can actually buy the business. It's actually very doable. You just have to start thinking about, I'm going to have to personally guarantee, number one, I'm going to be taking financial risks. And if this doesn't work out, it's going to cause me some real economic pain.
Mm.
So you want to, but it's much easier buying a business, even if you overpay for it a little bit, not a lot, and move on from there than trying to start a business from scratch, because you have a business that already has cash flow of some sort.
Excellent. So how would you buy a bankrupt business?
I probably wouldn't. What I would buy is what's called a zombie business. And a zombie business is a business that either private equity has not made successful, which is most of them, or you might be able to find a division of a publicly traded company where they've announced they're going to dump a division. And it could be a small division. It doesn't have to be one that's $100 million. It might be $2-3 million in sales. And they get to October and they haven't found a buyer, and it doesn't look like they're going to find a buyer. And then they'll start selling businesses for a bargain, because the market will penalize them if they haven't gotten rid of that business by the time the year end comes. Again, these are harder strategies to do. I mean, you can buy a business out of bankruptcy, I guess, if you think or if you believe that there's something there to rebuild.
So in your example at the beginning where you hit the home run immediately, what was the scenario there? You bought the business, you bought an existing business. What was the scenario and why was it such a home run right away?
It was easy to fix. That was the thing. It was, even though the business was in bankruptcy, it wasn't in bankruptcy where they had to close their doors. They still had customers. There was still cash coming in. Their problem was they had a big theft problem because they had no controls. So we put controls in place, and all of a sudden that fixed the leakage in the hole right there. And we had people who were doing, 40% of the work they should have been doing in the hours they were spending. They were paying their route drivers by the hour. We made a move relatively quickly within the first 2 years owning the business, where we put everybody on commission. First it was base plus commission, then went full commission a few years after that. We lost a few people who didn't want to work on commission, but we made a guarantee that nobody would make less money than they were making hourly. And in fact, most of them increased their pay by 50%, because all of a sudden, instead of being unsuccessful or inefficient, they started becoming relatively efficient. And over the years, we did things to make it more efficient. So they kept making more and more money, but you have to have the right people with the right headset. And we had to lose a bunch of people along the way.
Yeah. So you have, did that company, was the owner out of steam, worn out, tired?
Oh yeah, he was definitely out of steam. One of my favorite stories. He also was kind of a farmer. So when we took over the business, we went into his warehouse because ours was too small. And I remember being there one morning at 6 a.m, and I thought there was something staring me at the window. And I turned around, and there was one of Virgil's cows who was sitting there staring at me, which was a bit disconcerting. So I had to pick up the phone and call Virgil. I said, "Virgil, come over here and get your cow."
And this is in Vermont?
This was in upstate New York. This was
Okay.
outside of Plattsburgh, New York.
Excellent. So if you're watching on YouTube, we're having a great conversation with Josh Patrick. He's the author of Sale Ready Company, what it takes to create a business someone would want to own, even if you have no intention of selling. And if you're listening on Verbal, you guys be sure to subscribe to either on YouTube or on verbal, it makes a big impact. Josh, so what's I always like to ask, what's one question that you wished you could answer, but all these guys that have these podcasts never ask you the good question. What is it that I missed?
Well, that's something that's tough for me to figure out. You've actually asked some really, really good questions today, which is in the, it's really interesting. There are some podcast hosts. In fact, I would say most podcast hosts for business shows really are not experts at running a business. They don't bring their own experience into the game, nor are they willing to be vulnerable about some of the faux pas they've made over the years. In my experience, when you show vulnerability, you get a much, much better conversation going than when you start saying, "Oh, I'm the greatest host of all times, and I know all." So saying "I don't know" or asking what would happen if, or looking for the good stories out there, really makes a big difference in my opinion. So it's hard for me to say, "Gee, I wish someone had asked me this," because I'm willing and I love talking about almost anything you can come up with when it comes to what makes a private business first successful and then sustainable and finally sale ready.
So I'm curious, like, what's the one area that most business owners don't want to talk about? They're going to avoid until you finally get them to admit.
Well, they're willing to talk about, they're not willing to do it, and that's delegation.
Really?
The hardest skill, in my opinion, if you own a private business to learn, is how to be a good delegator.
Mm-hmm.
And most people give up. I mean, what they'll tell me, I'll say, "Okay, you need to learn how to delegate, or you need to start delegating." And they'll say to me, "Well, I tried that and it didn't work." Now, what happens? And frankly, the first 10, 15, 20 times you try to delegate, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to abdicate, which means you're going to give somebody something to do, not give them any support, and not do any check-ins.
Mm.
Or you're going to be a helicopter delegator, which means that you delegate something and then 10 minutes later you check in to see the progress. And 10 minutes after that, you check in to see the progress. And maybe you'll let somebody go for an hour before you check in. And you'll say to yourself, "Well, if I have to check in so often because they're incompetent," and that's what the owner is often thinking, "My people are incompetent. I can't trust them to do this work, so I have to do it myself." Well, the truth is we all make mistakes. And probably one of the things that business owners don't want to talk about is mistakes, because mistakes are bad in their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nobody wants to make mistakes. I would rather do it right than do it wrong, and so would you. The truth is we make mistakes all the time. We continue to make mistakes through our entire business career. So if we don't learn how to solve that issue, and we don't learn how to learn from mistakes and make mistakes learning opportunities, and ask the people who made mistakes, "What did you learn?" we're never going to have a great company, because everyone's going to be hiding their mistakes. That was a problem I had when I was first starting my business, because I was blamed and justified. If somebody made a mistake, they weren't going to tell me about it, so I was going to yell at them. When I finally became a human being, or sort of a human being, when somebody made a mistake, instead of me yelling at them, I might want to yell, I would take a deep breath. And I would say, "Okay, that's interesting. What did we learn?" And often they would say to me, "I don't know." And then after hearing that a bunch of times, I said, "I'm going to try something next time someone says that to me," which happened to be that very day. And I said, "Okay, let's pretend you know what you learned." And I would make them pretend. And that was what they actually learned. I said, "Well, that sounds like a pretty good lesson. What do you think we can do to make sure it doesn't happen again?" And then I was starting to learn how to systematize a business.
Mm.
If you don't systematize your business, you're going to have the same mistake made over and over and over again because you haven't given systems that support your people for doing it right.
Excellent. Josh, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You've been a great guest. We've been talking with Josh Patrick. He's the author of The Sale Ready Company, what it takes to create a business someone would want to own, even if you have no intention of selling. Josh writes a good book. Josh, when did you start to wear the title of Curmudgeon?
Officially or unofficially?
Yeah, well, I just was thinking about you when you were young and you were telling me that story. I was wondering, when did you start to just like, I'm gonna own that? When did that happen?
Oh, probably was about 13 or 14. I mean, I didn't, consciously realize that what I was doing. It was just sort of how I lived in the world.
Yeah.
I've always been one of those people who is I've been accused of being a contrarian a lot,
Mm-hmm.
where someone will say something and it doesn't make any sense to me. I'll say, I don't get it. I mean, what do you mean this is true? Here's what I know, and here's my evidence behind that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I almost didn't graduate from my high school because it was during the Vietnam era, and I organized the teaching in my high school, and the administration brought in all these pro-war people to talk, and I brought in all these anti-war people, and the anti-war people I brought in destroyed the pro-war people. I mean, just destroyed them. And I did that sort of thing for my whole life. I was in the band, and one of the other parents of the members thought they would be a better manager than me, so they tossed me out and forgot to tell me. And then they had to come back because they couldn't get any gigs, and I was the one that got them the work. So those sort of activities have been with me for a long time. It's not something new, but probably when I was around 35, 36, I said, this is how I live in the world, and I'm going to own it. So I started billing myself as a curmudgeon, kind of a friendly curmudgeon, but still a curmudgeon.
Yeah. Well, that's obvious, Josh. So, Josh, if someone is listening and they want to reach out to you, have a conversation, what's the best way?
Just email me, jpatrick@stage2planning.com. That's the number 2. That's the easy way to find me. Just go to one of our websites, and both websites says have a conversation. Let's click on it and set up a time for us to talk. It's free. We have 20-minute conversations we do with people all the time that are free. And I always guarantee you're going to walk away with at least one piece of take-home value that you can implement in your business when we get off the phone.
Excellent. All right. That's Josh Patrick. His new book, go out and get it. It's The Sale Ready Company. Beautiful cover. What it takes to create a business someone would want to own, even if you have no intention of selling. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle for sure. I have it right there. And hopefully soon on Audible.
Well, be probably September, October. The actual launch date of the paperback is July 20th. You can also go next week. Today is July 15th or June 15th, and we'll have our book website up very shortly, and that's www.salereadycompany.com. Really easy to remember.
Yeah.
And if you buy the book there, we have a bunch of bonuses for you that you'll probably find relatively valuable.
All right. Thanks, Josh Patrick, for being a great guest on the ROI Online Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve. I'm glad you brought me back as a repeat offender.
Repeat offender. I'm in that list too. And that's a wrap.